A great way to start playing slide is by sticking to the hot spots, the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 12th frets. So many cool licks and riffs live there, but if you're ready to go beyond that, this lesson has you covered. We're going to start filling in the notes in between those hot spots and create a sweet slide solo in open E tuning, like this. The first step we're going to take is to map the chord tones that we're soloing over. If we play the chord tones, we're guaranteed to play tones that sound good. Some sound better than others, but it sure beats playing wrong notes. Plus, the chords that we're going to work over only have 4 notes in them, so that cuts the field of possibilities down by a lot. And that's very helpful when you're getting started jamming solos on your own. Our example is an 8-bar blues in E, so let's take a look at the chord tones of E7, A7, and B7. We're playing over dominant 7th chords, which means we'll need a root, major, 3rd, 5th, and minor 7th interval. We're going to start with E and build an E7 chord, which gives us the notes E, G sharp, B, and D. Let's find those across all 6 strings, but we're only going to go up to the 5th fret. There's a whole lot of cool slide licks and riffs and even a full solo that we can do here, plus it will focus our efforts as we're building through this lesson. So you can definitely expand this later into different positions on the neck, but right now that's where we're going to focus. Our root, or E, is the open 6th string, our major 3rd. G sharp is here at the 4th fret. Then we switch strings. Remember, we're not going past the 5th fret here. And our 5th is the open 5th string, and that's B. Then we have our minor 7th, D, at the 3rd fret, and another E at the 5th fret. Now, because we're playing that, and because the 4th string is tuned to E, we have a little duplication there. No problem, just know it's there. But we've got that E, and then we also have basically the same thing as the 6th string. We've got our G sharp, the major 3rd, on the 4th fret. So just keep that in mind. Whatever you do on the 6th string, you can do on the 4th string as well. But then here's another duplication. That's a G sharp, 4th fret, 4th string in this tuning, and so is the open 3rd string. Right? So there's our G sharp. That's the major 3rd. So next we need a perfect 5th. That's B here at the 3rd fret. And then we've got another duplication, because if this is B, the open 2nd string is B in this tuning as well. So there's a lot of duplication built into this, but it's really usable as a slide player. So we've got our perfect 5th, B is the open 2nd string. Our minor 7th, D, there on the 3rd fret, and back up to the root. And maybe you picked up, you can do the same thing on the 5th string and the 2nd string. And then the 6th string is the same as the 1st string. They're both tuned to E, so we've got our root here, and then which is another duplication, by the way, and then we've got our major 3rd at the 4th fret. All right, I wanted to give you the detail behind that in E7 so that you can really get inside how I'm thinking about these notes and how they're laid out on the fretboard, including that little duplication quirk. I actually think it's an option, and we get to use that to our advantage as slide players. But let's quickly now go through the A7 and the B7. Knowing where the notes are is important, but we need to use them in a musical way. So let's start doing this with an exercise I call focused noodling. It's noodling, which is jamming freely without really thinking too much, but with a constraint that helps produce a result. Here's how it works. Use one chord at a time and solo over the chord using just the chord tones. That's our first constraint. It helps to use a chord loop as a backing track here. That really helps out a lot. And remember, we're also just using the first 5 frets here. That's the second constraint, but also keep keep it simple at first. Maybe something like this. Make a mental note, or better yet, record what you liked. And if you hit some notes outside of the chord tones that sounded good, that's great. Make note of that too. You're building your own lick vocabulary here in a fun way. And I want you to repeat this step for each chord in the progression. We just did E7, so that leaves A7 and B7 left to contend with. Now you can do this over several practice sessions. Don't rush it, take your time and have fun with it. The goal is to get comfortable creating your own licks. Definitely keep them simple at first if you're new to jamming. Don't try to play the most complicated thing in the world. Just stick to the chord tones, keep it simple, and have fun. But once you're comfortable jamming over each chord, it's time to dress this up a little. I mean, we're playing slide here, and this part is really begging for some bluesy slide techniques. So let's take a look at 4 quick techniques that you can use to add a little life to your phrases. This is one of my favorite techniques. I call it the push. We take our target note, say this 4th fret of the 1st string, the G sharp, and we start a fret low. That's where we pluck, and we slowly push the slide up into position. And we get this sort of bending sound as we approach the note. It's a really cool sound, and I think it really adds a lot of emotion. Of course, you can add some vibrato once you get to your note. Now the pull is the inverse of this. We start above the note and drop into place. And we still get that bending sound, but this time it feels more like we've got a pre-bend and release happening here. Now the next 2 go hand in hand, and really you could kind of think of them as faster versions of both the push and the pull. We start with slide ins. And that's where we start sliding from somewhere other than our target note, and we land on that target note. Now, that can either be sliding in from below the note, right? Or below the note in pitch, right? This is lower than this, or above, right? So this is a slide in, and this is a slide in. And it adds just a little embellishment to the note. Now a slide out is where we start from the target note, and we slide away, either down the fretboard or up, right? And of course, the bonus technique is vibrato. You got to have some good vibrato going on the guitar. It really brings out the notes when you're playing with a slide. That's a whole other topic unto itself. But right now, if we take these ideas and just combine them over our sort of stock plain lick that we improvised, we'll come up with something that's got a lot more soul. Now we're cooking. Get back to your A7 and B7 licks and treat them with some bluesy slide embellishments too. And then we just need to bring the chord changes together. But we don't want to sound like we're abruptly switching our thinking from E7 into A7 into B7. We need to connect the chord changes in a musical way. So try this. We're going to take the last part of the lick that we came up with for E7 and connect it to the chord change. We're moving into A7. So let's revisit the last part of the phrase and then figure out some options where we could go from there to bring us into this chord change. All right, so we could end here, and this note, the E note on the 2nd string, is in the A7. If you just bar across the 5th fret, you've got a major, and the E is a common tone. The E is a common tone in the E7, the A major, and the E7. But we've got to get moving. I don't just want to land here because that E has been played out a little bit, right? That was our kind of our home base for the E7 licks. I want to really call out what makes A7 an A7, and that is the minor 7th interval, which is a G. That can be found here, the 3rd fret on the 1st string. Now the real idea here is to take the note where you landed the last phrase and move into the nearest chord tone from the new chord, the chord that you're changing into. And this is kind of a double win here because moving from this E to this G is both the closest tone, right? And it's also the thing that makes the A7 stand out. It's that dominant 7th note from the chord. So this really is a great note choice here versus just staying here around the 5th fret. So we can spice up this chord change by just briefly even visiting that G note. And of course, you could call it out and stay on it a little longer. That's totally cool to do as well. And then here, I'm just going back and playing around with some different chord tones from our A7 chord map. But the idea is to move from where you land the phrase to the next chord tone of the chord that you're moving into. Let's see how we can do this moving from A7 into B7. So I get into my A7 chord like this. And I'll do this little lick, which is all around the 5th fret. And I'm just using the slide techniques of sliding out and in. And then, of course, some vibrato there before playing this over the next measure. Just a cool little rhythmic motif where I'm sliding up and really calling out that E note. So that's where we're landing, and now it's time to change to the B7 chord. The next nearest note, that's what we're looking for, is down 1/2 step, so 1 fret low. That's the D sharp, but I really want to scoop into that. I want to use one of our cool slide embellishments, so I'm going to do this. All right, so I just pushed the slide into the D sharp. It's a cool, spacey way to just add some emotion and build a little bit of tension as we arrive at that chord tone. But then we'll slide out with a couple of B notes there. Let's recap. So far, we've mapped the chord tones. We've noodled over each chord with some focus. We spiced things up with embellishments, and now we've just drilled the changes. And now you're ready to start putting it all together. And the cool thing is, as you put it together, you're going to come up with something completely different than me or anybody else. And I think that's awesome. That's what it's all about. It's getting your voice out of your guitar. But I want to have a look at an example 8-bar solo that I've came up with using this process, and I want you to see how many techniques that you can spot as I'm playing through this. Let's take a look. If there's any part of your solo that you're not happy with, repeat this entire process to find where you need to improve. Do you need to improve your phrasing and add to your lick vocabulary? If so, then learn your favorite players' licks and solos note for note. Are you freezing up and not playing with confidence? Then go back to the chord tone maps and work on them until you know the notes cold. Do you need to squeeze a little bit more mojo from your notes that you're already playing? If so, then you definitely need to tune up your slide technique. And technique is really the foundation of good slide playing and playing a great solo on your guitar. If you're not quite there yet, or you want to make sure that you got the basics covered, then check out my free 5 simple steps to better slide guitar. You can pick that up right over here, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, practice smart and play on.